There is someone in your life who is always unwell. Not once in a while. Not during an especially hard season. Always. There is always a headache, a flare, a mystery symptom, a condition that never quite gets diagnosed but never quite goes away either. There is always a reason today is not the day they can help, cannot show up, cannot handle one more thing. And you have learned, without ever agreeing to it, that your role is to accommodate this. To lower the volume of your own needs. To ask less. To carry more. Because they are fragile, and you are not, and that difference has somehow become the entire architecture of your relationship. Decode something that so many of you have lived and never had the language for. Not the narcissist who dominates a room. The narcissist who disappears into a hospital bed, a chronic diagnosis. A body that is always failing them at exactly the moment accountability arrives. Because there is a version of covert narcissism that hides inside illness itself. And once you see how it operates, you will not be able to unsee it. Let us start with the mechanism, because this is not chaos. It is a strategy, and it is one of the most effective ones available to a person who wants control without ever appearing to want anything at all. Illness is the one condition nobody is permitted to question. When someone says they are in pain, the socially acceptable response is belief, not scrutiny. When someone says their body is failing them, compassion is the only response most people feel safe offering. That is a deeply human instinct, and it is also, in the hands of a vulnerable narcissist, a perfect weapon. Every symptom becomes a transaction. Every flare becomes a demand that cannot be refused without appearing monstrous. And so the sick role does something no argument, no threat, and no accusation could ever do as cleanly. It removes you from a position of equal partner and places you in a position of caretaker, permanently. Once you are the caretaker, the terms of the relationship change. Your needs become secondary by default, because how could you possibly ask a sick person to meet them? Your frustration becomes something to feel guilty about, because how could you resent someone who is suffering? The illness is not incidental to the control. The illness is the control. Now let us look at how this actually shows up, because it rarely looks like outright deception. Few people in this dynamic are lying with total awareness. What is happening is often something quieter, and in some ways more disturbing. There is the condition that is real but endlessly amplified, a manageable issue described every single time in the most catastrophic terms available. There is the symptom that appears exactly when something is required of them and vanishes, unremarked, the moment the requirement passes. There is the diagnosis that keeps shifting, keeps evolving, keeps finding new specialists to consult and new tests to schedule, without ever quite resolving into something treatable or something disprovable. There is the exhaustion that arrives every time a conversation turns toward their behavior. There is the flare that begins the moment you raise a boundary. There is the pain that is somehow always severe enough to excuse them and never severe enough to actually seek consistent treatment for. None of this requires a single dishonest sentence. It operates through timing, through severity, through the particular choreography of when the body fails and when it does not. And because illness cannot be cross-examined without looking cruel, nobody ever does. Here is what most people do not understand about performed or exaggerated illness inside a narcissistic dynamic. It is not only a way of extracting care, it is a form of immunity. As long as this person is positioned as the one who is suffering, they cannot be the one at fault. Think about what happens when you try to raise something real. You say, I need you to follow through on what you promised. You say, I cannot keep managing everything alone. You say, this has been going on for years, and I am exhausted. What happens next? Their pain increases. Their voice grows faint. Their breathing changes. Suddenly the conversation that was about your exhaustion becomes a conversation about their symptoms, their doctor, their fear that something is seriously wrong with them. And you, the person who came into the conversation with a legitimate grievance, now finds yourself apologizing, comforting, and backing down. That is the armor at work. Nobody can hold a sick person fully accountable. To press further feels cruel, and they know that it feels cruel, and they have built their entire defense around that exact discomfort. Now let us talk about you, because understanding their pattern is only half of this story. Most people caught in this dynamic are not naive. They are people with a genuine capacity for compassion, people who take illness seriously because illness deserves to be taken seriously, people who would rather err on the side of care than risk abandoning someone who is actually struggling. That instinct is not a flaw. It is, in most contexts, exactly the quality the world needs more of. The vulnerable narcissist found that quality in you, and used it, calibrating their symptoms to whatever moved you most reliably. They learned which words made you soften. They learned which tone of suffering made you set your own needs aside without a second thought. And underneath that, many people in this dynamic develop something worth naming directly, a sense that their value in the relationship comes entirely from what they provide, that they matter because they nurse, because they research treatments, because they show up to every appointment, because they carry the emotional weight of someone else's body. As long as you are needed in that specific way, you feel secure in the relationship. That feeling of being needed can quietly become its own trap. At some point, if you have lived this long enough, you will have witnessed it. A moment when the illness simply was not there. Perhaps it was an activity they wanted badly enough. A trip, an event, an opportunity, and the fatigue that had made ordinary tasks impossible for weeks quietly lifted for exactly as long as it was needed. Perhaps it was a moment when someone else was watching, and the person who could not manage a conversation with you managed, effortlessly, to be charming and capable in front of a room full of people. That moment is disorienting, because it does not fit the story you have been living inside. If they can do it there, why can they not do it here? The answer is rarely a simple, theatrical lie. The more accurate answer is that their capacity is selective. It strengthens around whatever benefits them, and weakens around whatever is asked of them by someone who has already proven they will absorb the difference. This is not the profile of someone who cannot function. This is the profile of someone who has learned they do not have to. It is worth naming exactly what subtype we are describing, because it does not match the image most people carry of a narcissist. This is not the grandiose narcissist who dominates every room and demands admiration outright. This is the vulnerable narcissist, a subtype built not on confidence but on fragility, entitlement dressed as suffering, control dressed as need. Where the grandiose narcissist says, "Admire me," the vulnerable narcissist says, "Take care of me," and frames any resistance to that demand as abandonment of a person in crisis. This is precisely what makes the vulnerable narcissist so difficult to identify and in many ways so dangerous. Nobody expects manipulation from someone who appears frail. Friends and family will defend them instinctively. Point to the illness. Point to the suffering. Ask how you could possibly be upset with someone who is going through so much. Meanwhile, you are the one who has not slept properly in years, whose own health has quietly deteriorated under the weight of managing theirs, and who cannot say a single word about it without being framed as the healthy, capable one who should know better than to complain. So what do you actually do with this, without becoming the cold, uncaring person their narrative has already prepared everyone to see in you? The first shift is internal, and it is this. Genuine illness and performed illness are not identified by whether someone seems to be suffering. They are identified by pattern, by whether the suffering consistently arrives exactly when accountability does, and consistently lifts exactly when a benefit is on offer. You are allowed to notice that pattern without abandoning basic compassion. The second shift is behavioral. You can continue to offer care without continuing to offer unlimited, unquestioned accommodation. You can say, "I believe you are unwell, and I still need this conversation to happen." You can decline to let every disagreement dissolve into a discussion of their symptoms. You can seek independent medical confirmation of major claims, gently and without accusation, simply as a matter of informed care rather than suspicion. Expect escalation when you do this. The performance will intensify before it recedes, because it has always worked before, and it does not yet know that it has stopped working on you. Hold your position anyway. People who move through this dynamic and find their way to the other side describe something specific. It is not relief that nothing was ever wrong, because sometimes something is genuinely wrong, and that complexity never fully resolves into a clean answer. What they describe instead is the end of a very particular kind of confusion, the exhausting, endless calculation of how much of this is real, how much is exaggerated, and how much of your own life you are allowed to have back. Clarity does not mean you stop caring. It means you stop offering endless, unquestioned care as the price of staying in someone's good graces. It means your own body, your own health, your own exhaustion finally counts as data worth taking seriously, not as evidence of your selfishness. If this describes someone in your life, take a moment with that. You are not cruel for noticing a pattern. You are not abandoning someone by asking that illness, real or performed, stop functioning as an exemption from basic accountability. Naming this clearly is not the opposite of compassion. It is what allows compassion to survive without draining you completely. To Emily, thank you for asking us to decode this. So many of you have lived exactly this pattern and never had a name for it until now. In the next video, we are going deeper into a related dynamic: the narcissist who collapses entirely the moment their image, rather than their body, is under threat. It is one of the clearest windows into how fragile the mask really is. If this video gave language to something you have been carrying quietly, make sure you are subscribed so you do not miss it. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, please share it with them. Take care of yourself, and I will see you in the next one.